Now then, before we begin analyzing Sharon as a broker and what that means for the MCU too much, we should give ourselves a moment to get caught up on her story so far. Being the niece of Peggy Carter, the original love interest of one Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, Sharon grew up hearing her aunt tell stories about the good Captain's exploits. Inspired by these tales, Sharon became a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent herself, earning the alias Agent 13 in the comics, and eventually did become a close partner of Steve's after he was unfrozen from the ice. But while in the comics this led to a long, heroic career, things turned out much less fortunately for her in the films. When the MCU superhero community was split down the middle in a conflict over how to handle not only their recent failing in Nigeria, but also the fallout of a brainwashed Bucky murdering King T'Chaka, they did thankfully all end up getting pardoned. Well, everyone with a fancy nickname and a costume did anyway. The movies kind of forgot about Sharon at this point, and clearly so did the United States government. As we learned during the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, this forced her to flee the country and establish herself in Madripoor, making her way as a dealer of stolen artwork, and later, off-brand superpowers. Now, as has been pointed out in countless places by now, Power Broker is not some new moniker the show made up for Sharon, but actually a name taken from actual villains from the comics, albeit ones that really have nothing to do with Sharon. The first Power Broker was a corrupt businessman by the name of Curtis Jackson, who was originally the one to give John Walker and Lamar Hoskins their powers, while the other was a modern tech billionaire parody character who spent a little while in the comics menacing Scott Lang when he was trying to establish himself as a superhero and security expert in Miami. Where these characters functioned as statements on the greed of those already wealthy, Sharon operates a bit differently, essentially choosing to be the bad guy since her own country insisted on branding her one for things out of her control anyway. She also acquired her goods through a much different source than the others, as she at one point partnered up with Wilfred Nagel, a character who, in the comics, originally oversaw the experiments that gave Isaiah Bradley his powers, whereas in the show, he reverse engineers it from his blood. Now, you'd think that finally earning that pardon, being welcomed back to her former station at the end of the show, and losing all of her super serum would be the end of Sharon's Power Broker days. However, that final scene reveals that with her pardon, she simply plans to sell power of a different kind. Namely, insider trading. So, okay, Sharon is still active as a criminal, and now she has access to all sorts of insider information from S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as potentially the ability to acquire prototypes of all sorts of super tech that may pop up in the MCU in the future. So what does this mean for the MCU, you ask? Well, it basically means that despite losing what she had of the serum and being unable to make more, what with Nagel's demise, she is sitting just as pretty as she was at the start of the show. There are plenty of bad guys out there who would pay hefty sums to be able to take some sneak peeks at S.H.I.E.L.D.'s plans and files, not to mention plenty of characters in the Marvel Universe whose supervillainous careers are owed to a few choice pieces of equipment. If Sharon makes good on handing out various superweapons to the crooks and thugs of the MCU, the setting may see a rise in small-time mercenary and henchman-style villain characters from the comics making future cameos. They'd all easily make for the perfect opening scene or mid-movie action fodder, making the MCU feel even more huge than it already is. I mean, let's be real, wouldn't it be fun to have minor henchmen characters who maybe can't carry a movie by themselves and are only in it for the money show up more often? I'm talking about characters like Boomerang, Killer Shrike, Beetle, Constrictor. Frankly, there's an endless list of candidates. We've already seen how much spice throwing in the occasional Batroc can add, so why not? And then there's the sweet, delicious future Captain America drama of indirectly having caused so much grief and being a villain who is a former friend of the whole Stars and Stripes family of heroes supplying any number of crime lords with super tech for their goons. If Sharon really wants to, she might find herself with a long, long line of very eager customers willing to pay to keep the heroes busy and audiences entertained for a very long time.